For a moment of silence in commemoration of the 6 million Jews who perished during the war.
If I sit there, am I vlogging or not?
You'd think the plot would twist, would turn, that a story would develop, and you'd soon be enveloped in a world of words. But within this binding, you'll be finding one word, repeated 6 million times: Jew. Each and every Jew was a world, and we lost 6 million worlds. One page represents a community gone. One line, a family. One word, individuality. There are no words to describe the Holocaust. Words cannot capture the pain of persecution, liquidation of entire cities. My words will never humanize cattle cars, ease the camp's unimaginable horrors. My words can never repair the world that was. My words can never capture the strength of a Jew, bound by tradition, life and death as part of the nation. There are no words to describe how I feel, that my children will never know a survivor. This reality is impending. We can dream no longer. We must use our words and then use them stronger. For the word history is made up of his story and her story, and we are destined to repeat it if we forget but one. I will tell my child story by story. Lula Glau, who survived Buchenwald at the age of 6, who rose from the ashes and made it to Eretz Israel. He is who we know as the former chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau. Livia Baton Jackson, who survived Auschwitz at the age of 13. After the war, a German woman approached her. "How old are you?" she asked. Livia responded, "I'm 13. The woman gasped. "You look at least 60 years old," she responded. Livia responded, "Lady, I may be 13, but I have lived 1,000 years." David Berger, killed by the Nazis in 1941. In the last letter he ever wrote, he said, "I hope to one day know that people will know of my existence, that people will know that there once stood a man named David Berger." Esther Wagner, who risked her own life by jumping out of a cattle car and ended up living. A few years ago, I had the privilege of hearing her. Her words will forever stay in my heart. She said, "The fact that I am sitting before you right now proves that God exists." Solomon Radasky, he was the only one of 78 members of his family to survive. He realized that the number etched upon his arm by the Nazis in Auschwitz added up to 18. Chai, life. This gave him the courage to survive. Esther Klein, who survived Auschwitz by fighting with her faith. She benched after every measly piece of bread she was given, and she even mourned for the loss of her people She expressed how she wished she would have put up a fight when they came to destroy. She said, if you have the chance to defend what's right, don't depend on another, do something. Do something. Shatter the silence, make their voices heard. 6 million worlds are in our hands. Use your words.
Welcome to the Tekes Yom HaShoah Tafshin Ayin Daled. We gather here tonight to commemorate the 6 million souls who perished during the Holocaust. It was almost 70 years ago that the Holocaust came to an end. We live at the end of a generation in which we are still lucky enough to hear the stories of survivors. We must listen to their words closely because it is our responsibility to internalize their words. It is for this reason that the theme of tonight will be continuing the conversation. In Hebrew, tonight's theme can best be captured by the phrase, Kol hayom hi sifati. At every moment, the Holocaust, must be part of our conversation. That is our mission tonight, to hear the stories, feel the pain, and internalize the message. And Frank captured tonight's mission in the following simple words. How true that his words were when he said, all children must look after their own upbringing. Parents can only give good advice or put them on the right path, but the final forming of a person's character lies in their own hands. We are those children tonight. We hear the wise words of our parents, and we now have the obligation to continue the conversation. Please rise for the singing of the national anthem and Hatikvah.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed, and the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and in the rocky tread glare the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Kol b'leva benima nefesh Yehudi homiya uvatei Mizrach kadim
initially served as a consul general representing Israel, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut since 2011. Prior to his appointment, he served the state of Israel in many different capacities and has had a major hand in improving Israel's public affairs and media relations worldwide. Having a representative from Israel here with us tonight is significant in our aspects of what our conversation is. The generation after the Holocaust. Mishoah l'Tkuma. We must both remember the horrors of the Holocaust and we must rebuild communities, both in America and in Israel. It is my honor to call upon Ambassador Ido Aharoni to share his words with us.
Thank you so much for honoring me. Being here is a great honor for me. I want you to know that I love everything about this institution, this president, Richard Joel knows very well. I especially love what you've done here. The theme is extremely important in my view. The visual articulation of the theme is extremely powerful. To add color, this is exactly my message to you. And let me explain. What I'd like to do in the short time that I have, in the spirit of continuing the conversation, is to share with you a couple of conversations that I had with survivors and what I learned from those conversations. You know, yesterday I addressed a large crowd, perhaps the largest in this country that gathers every year for the Holocaust Remembrance Day at Temple Emmanuel. But earlier that day, I visited the gravesite of a great Jewish and American hero at West Point. His name is David Mickey Marcus. I don't know how many of you have ever heard the name, but David Mickey Marcus was a colonel in the U.S. Army who took part in the liberation of the camps. And as a Jew, a New Yorker, of course, was shocked by what he had seen, changed his life. And those of you who don't know that chapter in our history, it's a very dark chapter in the history of the international community. Between the years 1945 to 1948, hundreds of Jewish refugees, hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees, many of them Holocaust survivors. In fact, most of them were either Holocaust survivors or Holocaust refugees. They were denied entry to what was then Palestine by the British mandate. And we had to create this operation called illegal immigration, Hebrew Aliyah Bet. If you've heard of the story of the Exodus and other very famous attempts to break the siege of Palestine, this was the illegal immigration, Aliyah Bet. Many of the people who volunteered to make this happen came from the United States. We had about 3,900 volunteers. Nearly 150 of them died in combat. But in 1947, as Ben-Gurion was realizing that there was no other choice but rather to proclaim independence, knowing that the day after he will make that proclamation, the tiny, fragile Jewish state is going to be attacked, he sought the advice of well-experienced, high-ranking officers who had a previous experience in Europe. The only pool of such officers existed in the United States. So the story goes that David Ben-Gurion approached no less than 26 high-ranking officers, all of them Jewish, and asked them to volunteer to help build the Israel Defense Force. Only one said yes. That was David Mickey Marcus. And David Mickey Marcus helped us to build our military might because he was exposed to the horror of the Holocaust as a colonel in the U.S. military. He did what we are all supposed to be doing. He displayed responsibility. He literally understood the phrase, the saying, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh. We're all responsible for our fellow human beings. That was what he took from his exposure to the horrors of the Holocaust. Now you'll know the end. David Mickey Marcus died tragically by friendly fire in June of 1948. He's buried in West Point, the only soldier in the history of the U.S. military who's buried in an American military cemetery, although he died fighting for another nation. On his grave it says, a soldier for all humanity. And continuing the conversation, to me, is to continue that conversation about the need to remember. I had many conversations with Elie Wiesel, perhaps the greatest moral authority of our generation. And in one of those conversations, he expressed to me his concern with something that I thought wasn't that important. It was a practice used by the Mormon Church to collect information about deceased Jews and non-Jews, and after their death, announce that they became Mormons. And I really didn't understand why Elie Wiesel was so agitated about it. Because I thought, we know who we are. There are plenty of history books that tell all the stories that we do. Elie Wiesel said, no. You don't understand the perspective that I take on this issue. He said, I'm not concerned with how people will remember the Holocaust 5 years from now, or 10 or 50. I'm thinking 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now. We need to think that far in order to make sure that no historian will one day wake up with this great scientific discovery that the Holocaust of the Jews were actually not of the Jews, but of a different faith, of a different people, of a different ethnicity. And the way to make sure this doesn't happen leads me to my second conversation that I had with another Holocaust survivor, who unfortunately is no longer with us, Eli Zborowski, who was the head of the American Friends of Yad Vashem, Israel Holocaust Museum for many, many years. A powerhouse when it came to Holocaust remembrance. And Eli Zborowski, who really was a unique gentleman. I don't know how many of you had the chance to hear him. He told me that his real concern is that future generations, your children, will be preoccupied with the evil of the perpetrators of this crime, and less with the richness of the lives of the victims. Because extreme radical evil stimulates our curiosity as human beings. This is the way we are. This is why, for example, people are attracted to horror films. Now, it's not that it's not important to learn about the Nazi killing machine and to gather information about exactly what happened. But let us not forget for a second that the most important thing that we should pass on from one generation to another is not the evil of the perpetrator necessarily, but rather the richness of the lives of the victims. The totality of their Jewish experience in Europe. This year, we mark 70 years to the extinction of Hungarian Jewry. Every community had a tragic end in Europe, but Hungarian Jewry more than others. Why? Because they were on the verge of surviving the Holocaust. Their end came very swiftly. Within 8 weeks, 437 Hungarian Jews were killed. The total number of Hungarian Jews killed in the Holocaust, 565,000. You know, at Temple Emmanuel, the most powerful experience is that every year they ask women who survived the Holocaust to come on stage and light a candle with their daughters, their granddaughters, and if they have, their great-granddaughters. And I've been attending this ceremony for many years, and it never occurred to me that those who attended, this was brought to my attention today by one of my staff members, who's been going to this for almost 30 years. It never occurred to me that 30 years ago, there were tens and tens, literally tens and tens of candles on stage because there were so many women who survived the Holocaust that came with their daughters and their granddaughters. And it leads me to my final thought that I'd like to leave with you. As you said correctly, unfortunately, this is the way of the world. In a few years, your children will grow up with no real interaction with a survivor. It's true, we will have technology. We will have the ability to access the enormous database that was put together by the Righteous People's Foundation. All those testimonials, 80,000 survivors, are describing in detail their life in Europe before the Holocaust, their experience, whether in the ghetto or the concentration camp. They talk about the family members that they lost. They talked about the life after the Holocaust. And that's great. Technology is a great help. But I think that what will happen is that the second generation will have to step in. And the closest thing that your children will have to this is the children of the survivors. And the next generation will have the grandchildren of the survivors. And it is our job to make sure that we continue the conversation by not only focusing on the radical evil of the machine that killed those 6 million people, that could have imagined the world today if not for the Holocaust. Can you grasp that? No one can. But rather focus on the life that were lost in Europe, the richness of the culture, of the Jewish experience, the wealth of knowledge, the tradition. Those are the things that we need to internalize so that the memory will never be forgotten. Yehi Zichram Baruch, and thank you again for honoring me tonight.